Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Zaccarini. This is my presentation for our EDU 807 course, or Quantitative Methods with Dr. Ming Zhang. The title of my project is Student Perceptions on Learning and Motivation while using Mobile Instant Messaging. So before I begin my presentation, I'd like to give an overview of what's included, such as the project's purpose, the research questions, the literature review, which will just include key examples of work that influenced this project, the methodology, the results slash discussion, limitation, conclusion, and recommendation for future research. The purpose of this study is to explore remote undergraduate students' perceptions of learning and motivation while using mobile instant messaging, or abbreviated MIM, which you'll see throughout the presentation. And the influence of this is from, as a teacher, recognizing students' motivational decline as course progresses, and a paper by Wang and Morgan that focuses on how uh, dialogue software actually helps students um, participate or become more active in a highly remote and structured online course. So that is what this project or study is looking at, is in terms of how a mobile device, right, that allows students to interact with each other can then be more cognizant of what they're learning and feel more motivated to continue. So the results will benefit higher education instructors or course designers that work to improve the design of remote undergraduate programs, because this project also reveals that the design of the course can also influence how students become more aware of what they're learning and their motivation while using mobile instant messaging. And there's little research on student autonomy, motivation, and mobile instant messaging, especially with mobile devices that can be used as an educational technology. So the research questions for this project are: how does mobile instant messaging affect students' perception of learner autonomy? How does it affect students' perception toward goal setting, their perception of course performance, and their perception of persistence through course obstacles, and the perception of task choice in a course? The first couple of questions represent the learner autonomy part of this study, and looking at how students become more cognizant of how they regulate and acquire skills, which is a part of goal setting. And then the other questions are a reflection of student motivation and how, or more specifically, intrinsic motivation and their sort of uh, observations or outlook on the way they continue throughout a course, how they see their success and how they overcome issues within the course to help them to continue, and how they're also um, how they look at assignments, which is the task choice part, in terms of choosing um, you know assignments in a course that ultimately appeal to them. So and this is, I can explain a bit more with that in terms of the literature review, which is the three themes of learner autonomy, motivation, and communication mediums. And beginning with learner autonomy, which is what the first couple of questions were about, which is such as goal creation. Uh, I'm using the definition by D.C. Henry, who explained autonomy as students acquiring cognizance of their learning experience in regards to skill confidence and self-regulation, which basically means that students become more aware of what they're learning and how they can use it, and how then they could also pace the process of their learning, which involves such as making schedules, knowing how much they need to read at a certain time point, etc. And within learner autonomy, we have research done by Lisa River and Maria Jose Biznila. And just a heads up, I try not to butcher last names, but it might happen. They explain, Ribber and Bizzanilla explain that there are three categories of course design with student autonomy in mind, which I thought was really important and could be very influential in this, in the sense that they define learning goals for students, right? And when you're scaffolding course, and you have assignments that don't greatly impact the student's grade, but they can still learn from assignments, which would they consider low stakes assessments, and they help students evaluate their learning, etc. And then immersive assignments encourage students to learn from each other. So this is how you can design a course with considering that students can become more cognizant of what they're learning, which goes back to learner autonomy. And all of this is also a part of motivation, and learner autonomy and motivation do interconnect in the sense that one, it can impact the other. And the most important work of this paper study comes from Jacqueline Eccles and Alan Wigfield's motivation theory called expectation and value theory. So there explains that the relative value and probability of success of various options are key determinants of choice. So basically, if students feel that they can have options from which to choose from to, say, complete work in a course, such as different assignments that give them different options to demonstrate that they learn material, then they have higher chances of seeing that they can be successful in the course, perform well, and find that the course has more meaningful and purpose to them. And again, this goes back to learner autonomy, because we're creating and choosing assignments that can test whether they learned or not, and by providing multiple assignments or options from which to choose from, that then influence their motivation. So hopefully that's clear in terms of the connection. And then where does this play into communication mediums? Well, according to Patient Rambe, mobile devices have a huge opportunity to be used as learning technologies because of the frequency of which they are used by students and their the presence in students' lives. And in another study by Chai Prasad and Segal, which you can find in my literature review, my references, but they revealed that mobile technology positively impacted student motivation in their study, in which they gave two different groups of students access to mobile devices and one group no access. So this is how it sort of all interconnects, and with learning management software such as Blackboard, Canvas, or Moodle, etc., that the mobile devices can be used simultaneously with learning management software. So with the study's methodology, I'm looking at a target population for the survey is undergraduate students enrolled in two sections of an Introduction to Communications course, and we're selected through a non-probability samplings method, which is ultimately the ideal, but also the only option. Oh, well, I said that, but okay. The point being is that we're looking at populations, like small samples of a population, right? So that's what we have to use. And as you know, this is not a real study. It's hypothetical, and but the purpose or the intention behind it was to survey students enrolled in this course that I teach and see how they were impacted by mobile instant communication. Okay. The procedure was that the survey was administered through Qualtrics, and the data was analyzed through SPSS, as we all know, which is the software program for social sciences. And then the instrument used was the Students' Adaptive Learning Engagement in Science Instrument, or SAILS, which is a very well-established instrument in measuring student autonomy and motivation. The instrument was actually used in primary and secondary students in the science classes, but a lot of the survey items, which I'll give examples of, have relative value to measuring majority of students' autonomy and motivation. For example, in looking at learner autonomy, or asking how students perceive their learner autonomy, the survey items can consist of, I can master the skills are taught, or I can do difficult work, with 5 options for the students to choose from strongly agree to strongly disagree. So I thought I would share the survey results, or just one of them, from the first research question is how does mobile instant messaging affect students' perceptions of course perception? Actually, that might be the fourth research question, but okay. So the survey item, uh, relatively, they were all mostly positive. A lot of strongly agree and agree. This is just one example of how students were positively influenced by the mobile instant messaging in the course, and that through communicating with other students, which was the um, uh, sort of in the study involved, was that then they become more cognizant of what they're doing, which then influences how that they can complete difficult work if they try, and they believe that they will receive good grades. But ultimately, this is to show that the answers were mostly positive in the sense that students agreed and strongly agreed with most of the survey items, which shows um, how instrumental mobile instant messaging was. I would like to also cover three forms of equations that I did with the data to make sort of inferences about um, the the information taken from the students that were involved with the study. So this is the first one. The first question or hypothetical question, right? I sort of asked was, and this goes to the research question about overcoming course obstacles, which I believe is the third or fourth. But anyway, the question is, will students be more likely to keep working even when tasks are uninteresting if they identify as highly proficient in using technology, right? The highest levels are masters and excellent. Excuse me, I wanted to focus on this because mobile instant messaging is a technology. And we can see that there is significance based on the significance listed there on the ANOVA, right? So what I did was I calculated a multiple linear regression to predict students' goals, right? And then what I found was that the summary of the significance is 0.001, which is less than 0.05, which means we have a significant linear regression. So students most likely to be proficient in using technology will be more likely to keep working even when tasks are uninteresting. Now, the next is there a significant difference between students' perception of persistence through course obstacles and their self-rating of using technology, which it sounds ultimately very similar to the previous one, but I still think an obstacle is much different than, say, if the work is not interesting. I don't consider uninteresting work an obstacle. It's just it's like an attitude, like, oh, this is not. So that's it. It looks like it's very similar, but it's not. Um, so this I calculated an independent samples t-test to compare the mean scores of participants' perception of persistence, right, and their rating of technology. What I found was that there were no differences between the means of low technology competent students and high technology competent students. And that shows that there is no significant difference. So it does not determine rating, how they rate themselves as technology does not influence persistence through course obstacles. Okay? Finally, are students' perceptions of course performance influenced by the degree level and their self-rating of learning technology proficiency? I should have said this also earlier with learner technology proficiency is that there are 5 levels. You have minimal, making progress, survival, mastery, and excellent. And then with degree level, we have associates and bachelors. I thought this was important to include because most of my students online are either associate's degrees, getting associate's degrees, or bachelor's degrees. So with the final one, this was a factorial ANOVA to compare the student's perception of course performance of the 4 ratings, educational technology, and the 2 ratings of associate's or bachelor's degrees. I'm not going to give the whole formulaic thing, right? So so there's no significance for degree level nor in their proficiency in educational technology, and nor is there significance in the interaction of the two. So we conclude that neither degree level nor rating proficiency have a significant impact on their course performance. But I'll just if you can look at this graph, it demonstrates that point. So just to recap, in terms of discussion, I found that the results that I sort of emphasize on do go back to the research questions in the sense of understanding of what we're asking for, but it also sort of extends on how we can make sort of predictions and assumptions about students and how they'll do. So um, students who perceive themselves as proficient using technology will be more likely to keep working even when tasks are interesting in a remote course, which I think is important because in order to continue in an online course, you have to know how to use technology, such as making a Word document or even accessing an online course book, right? And that I think is important to know because I did have this one time a student, not to digress, but it does represent the point that the student did not know how to access the online course book and eventually just disappeared or never didn't continue participating. So an inference cannot be made on a student's technology usage proficiency and their persistence through course obstacles. I think that's also important in terms of relating back to the research question on course obstacles because students do have will have obstacles uh, as they progress because it does get harder in the sense that they might not understand a certain topic or concept. But just because they consider themselves to be excellent or masters of technology usage does not mean then that could mean that they will persist through difficult material. Inference cannot be made on students' ability to complete coursework based on degree level and knowledge of educational technology. Ultimately, we can't assume if we have students in classes or in a course, right, just because they're an associates or bachelors, that will not have an impact on terms of their ability to complete the coursework. So limitation, the survey questions were not focused enough on mobile instant messaging, I think. I mean, at the end of the day, this is also very hypothetical, and I still think that it could, if this is a limitation because there could be items that measure it, but we have to use an established instrument, and that also to add on to a survey instrument that, I mean, you kind of have to be a bit established as a researcher and not just a student. So unless there was another survey already created, then yeah. But how much of the study can be replicated with a different instrument that emphasizes mobile instant messaging, which I think could also be a springboard for um, more research, right? But I think this was the most important limitation to highlight. I mean, there's always going to be limitations in a study in terms of what's being impacted. And then finally, conclusion, based off of the research question, I found that most of the survey results were very positive. So I do believe that mobile instant messaging has a positive influence on students' ability to have more confidence in their learner autonomy. They will create goals, persist through obstacles, and perform well in the course, and be more cognizant of how they choose tasks in a course. So I do see a, a positive impact in terms of what the results showed and the questions posed. And then a recommendation for future research. I think a study like this could really benefit from qualitative methods, so then it would be a mixed methods approach, but ultimately having open-ended survey questions that students can answer, because I feel that students can also provide additional insight. That because open-ended questions also further sort of glean students' perceptions on their learning and motivation. I think that's something that could be a study extension on this study to get further information on students' actual opinions too. That can then also complement the data. So that is my project, and I hope that you all got a lot of information out of this, and I look forward to watching everybody else's presentations. So thank you.